Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to Pearson English Assessment Teacher Training Academy. Actually, this is the third edition. So we are talking with Mike just before. This is the third edition. It's time to think about some inspirational ideas for the fourth edition. As people are joining, the most important element, if you could type in the chat, if you can see us, you can name the place you are right now. Let's see. So we've got Peru. Great to have you here. We've got Australia.
Wow, Australia's up late. Or is it?
Yes.
Must be the middle of the, isn't it the middle of the night in
Mexico,
Australia?
it's 1 a.m. here. Okay, 1 a.m. So you are the
Wow,
So when it comes
wow.
to the time. Ukraine, Brazil, UK, Chile. Good. So our presenter will be asking some
Wow.
questions. So it's good to see that the chat is working fine. We've got
Mhm.
Vietnam, Albania, Lithuania, Georgia. Good. Poland. Nice to have you with us. Georgia. Yes. At least I'm not alone
Uh-huh.
because I'm based in Poland as well. Okay, so the Pearson English Assessment Teacher Training Academy. This is actually the fifth webinar, and all of them, the recordings, you can find the recordings on the Teacher Training Academy website. So the last time in June we had the Beyond Seat practitioner experience. So what I had a conversation about, Monica and Magali was supporting us when it comes to delivering and introducing the level test into the institutions, the things we need to take care. Mike Mayer had the introductory session on the role of diagnostic testing. And today it's great pleasure to have you again with us. So today we'll move into the question, like metrics matter, like measuring students' growth as we move along this learning pathway. So I hope that Mike will share your insight, like, is it really worth doing it, and what are the things you need to remember? Then in September, we'll
Oh,
move.
sorry.
Yes, then in September, we'll have another session with practitioner experience about measuring growth. And then there's going to be a session on English benchmark young learners. So for those of you who deal with young students. And then we're going to finalize our training academy for this year with the international certificate, with the skills-based session. And the final one, my aim is to bring to you a practitioner who is actually dealing with international certificate preparation. So this is the plan for the end of Teacher Training Academy 2024. And by the end of this session, you will get from me an email, and you will find a certificate, you'll find a PDF with key takeaways from Mike, and you will find a link to a short feedback form. So we would appreciate your comments about the session. Okay. The next one. So you'll get it by Monday at the latest. I will do my best to share it with you tomorrow. If not, then you'll get it by Monday at the latest. So I guess this is time for you, Mike, to step in and to share with us your knowledge about metrics that matter. Enjoy the talk.
Hey, thanks, Bartek. Hello, everybody. Greetings. I didn't type my location into the chat, but I'm based in London in the UK, where surprisingly the sun is shining today, so we're all very happy and complaining about how hot it is. Thanks for joining. We're going to be looking at gauging student growth. So really that boils down to measuring progress. Are we doing it? How do we do it? Some advice on what we need to be able to do it well. And if anybody joined my previous session, I like to start with a few questions just to gauge the room, read the room, see who's in the room. So Just a few simple questions. You just type 1, 2, or 3 into the chat. Are you currently measuring student progress? So yes, daily, yes, kind of at the end of a year, the course, the year, or no, you're not currently. So I'm seeing a few yeses. I'm seeing people measuring it at the end of the course. I'm also seeing a few people who are measuring it daily and at the end of the course. Okay, great, thank you. So it seems that most people are currently measuring progress, which is great. Are there any challenges in measuring student progress? So I've just jotted down some ideas that I think are possibly challenges. Things like, the number of students you're having to monitor in a class, the resources you have available, the time you have available, knowing which metrics you need to be measuring. How do you communicate the results to the students? Is it all of the above? Is it something different? If it's something different, please go ahead and type that into the chat. And say, whoa, okay, so 5, 6, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6. We're communicating the results, a lot of people with all of the above. 1, class size, 3, time, 4, knowing which metrics to use. Okay, so I'm going to take from that most people on the call, although I'm not sure all 140 of you have keyed in, but most people are measuring progress, but it can be problematic. And what can I tell you today that maybe will make it less problematic? And this, as Bartek explained, will be followed up in the next practitioner session. So a couple more questions before we get started. If you are measuring progress, which of these skills on the screen are you measuring? Grammar, vocabulary, the 4 skills, all of the above? Okay, a lot of people saying they're measuring all of the above. Okay, you measure everything. Okay, some people focusing on reading. Okay, but most people saying you're focused on all of the above. Okay, final 2 questions. Are you using a formal test? So something that's either created by your institution or that you buy from a publisher? Or are you doing it informally in class? So a few people using formal tests, it seems. It depends, yes, 1 and 2, bit of both, formal, informal, both ways. No, yes, no, no, no. Okay, and the very final question, and then I will get on to the presentation. If you're using a formal test, does it give you results on the Common European Framework? So now I don't know whether we're still answering the previous question or we're going on to, I'm going to assume we're on this one. So are you getting results on the Common European Framework? Yes, no, yes, 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 no. Yes, no. Okay, so a mixture. Right, thank you. We will be back in the chat later on in the presentation. Let me just remove this from my screen, which is blocking me from seeing what I'm doing. Okay, so this is what we are going to be covering today. If you've seen me present before, if you see me on social media, if you see me at conferences, you'll know that I head up something called the Global Scale of English. And so obviously what I'm going to be talking about today relates to the Global Scale of English, because everything that we do at Pearson English is based on the Global Scale of English. So I just want to set it into the context of the Common European Framework, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, and probably more of you are familiar with Common European Framework than the Global Scale of English. Then I want to move on to demonstrating how progress monitoring is part of that best practice learning, teaching, and assessment. And then how do we build solid foundations that are going to support you in monitoring progress? And then towards the end, I'll be giving you a couple of approaches to progress monitoring. Okay, so again, I know some of you will have been at the placement test webinar, and you may have seen me elsewhere present, and this is, if you've never heard of it, then that's fine. But what is your familiarity with the global scale of English? Do you know it and use it? Do you know it a bit, but you mainly use the Common European Framework? You've kind of heard of it, but you've never used it, or actually, this is the first time you're hearing it. So I've got first time I'm hearing it. I mainly use the Cepher. I use it. I've heard of it, but never use it. Never heard of it before. Okay, well, in a way, that kind of makes me feel good because I'm going to be teaching you something that you didn't know. For those who are using it really well, using it and know it really well, bear with me when I just explain the basics again that I'm sure you probably already know. So, Common European Framework, published 2001, hugely influential on the teaching of languages in Europe and on the teaching of English around the world. And like anything which has had a huge impact and teachers start using it, it's when teachers start using it that they start finding kind of limitations and issues. And so when we were thinking of developing the global scale of English, what we were trying to do was to address some of these limitations that people were finding when using the Common European Framework. And I should say, using the Common European Framework in contexts maybe where it wasn't intended to be used. So Common European Framework is focused mainly on general English. So if you're teaching English for business or for academic study, they are domains within the Common European Framework, but they were never really the key focus of the Common European Framework. It was developed for adults, young adults, kind of 14, 15 years and older, was never intended to be used for primary, lower secondary learners, even though many people around the world have tried to use it in that context. And there's a lot of information about speaking in the Common European Framework, which is great, but certainly Pearson as a publisher is focused on teaching for skills. And I'm guessing that most of you as teachers are focused on teaching for skills. And so we needed more information for reading, listening, and writing. And then kind of the key piece that we'll focus on today is using Common European Framework to measure progress, which if we look around the assessment world, many assessments report on the Common European Framework. But one of the key problems of using the Common European Framework to measure progress is that it can take a long time to move between Common European Framework levels, particularly when you start getting to the B1, B2 level. It can take years. And so, year after year, measuring the progress on an assessment that reports on Common European Framework, you B1, you B1, you B1, you B1. It's not very motivating. It's not motivating for the student. It's not motivating for the teacher. It's not motivating for the parents. It's a problem. And so that's something that we've tried to address with the global scale of English and that we will look at in more detail today. And then finally, if anybody's read the Common European Framework, the Blue Book, it is quite difficult. It's quite academic, and the information is spread out in a way that teachers have found it difficult to implement in their day-to-day jobs. So again, we tried to create resources and tools to support teachers in the classroom. Most of us working on this, we've been teachers, we know what it's like to be in the classroom, and so we try to develop the tools and resources to support what's happening in the classroom. And so over the past 10 years, you may have seen we've had some celebrations on social media. We've just celebrated 10 years since the launch of the Global Scale of English. In that time, we've developed a number of resources, including 5 different frameworks of learning objectives to target the different needs and different contexts of different types of learner. So pre-primary learners, very different from adult learners. We've got young learners in primary, we've got adults learning general English, adults learning academic English, and adults learning professional English, business English. And if you drill down into these frameworks, you'll see very similar format to the Common European Framework. Everything is expressed, all the learning objectives are expressed in terms of what a learner can do in the language. So this is a functional approach to teaching and to measuring and to assessing language proficiency. It's not about the grammar, it's not about the vocabulary, it's about what you can do with that information. And so when you look at these learning objectives, you'll see anything with a P after it is copyright Pearson. That means that's new. We've created that learning objective and validated it with teachers around the world. And anything with a C means that it's come from the Common European Framework. So all of the Common European Framework is included in the framework for adult learners. The little A next to it means that we've adapted it, so simplified the language in many cases. You also have access to a toolkit, a teacher toolkit, where you will find all of those learning objectives, but equally you will find grammar objectives aligned to GSE and the Common European Framework. You'll find vocabulary for adults and for young learners. And you will find a text analyzer for adults where, as a teacher, you can take a text that you found on the internet, put it into the analyzer, and it will give you the rough readability level of that text. We're not going to focus on any of that today, but I wanted to make sure that you have this tool because it can be useful when it comes to measuring progress. So, the Common European Framework, let's have you back in the chat. How many levels are there in the Common European Framework, please? Just put the number in the chat. Okay. 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 Oh, looks like we've got 100% agreement. Yep. Everybody's agreed. It's 6 levels. And, if I was assessing you, I'd say, well, you can have half a point for that because it's kind of true, but it's not absolutely true. So when the Common European Framework was published, and again, if we look at assessments from other publishers, they report those assessments on 6 levels of the Common European Framework: A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. However, there are now 10 levels. So A2, B1, and B2 are divided into 2 levels, a lower level and a higher level. So A2, A2 plus, B1, B1 plus, B2, B2 plus. You might think that's just a detail, but actually, when you come to measuring progress, that's kind of important to know. And it still surprises me that there are so many teachers around the world who are not aware of these higher levels. In fact, I was contacted on Saturday by our team in Indonesia, asking me, did Pearson invent A2 plus, B1 plus, B2 plus? No, we didn't. It always has been in the Common European Framework, but nobody has really paid any attention to it. And I'll tell you why it's important. Because if you're measuring proficiency, And if you're measuring progress, you probably have the experience of a learner moving from A1 to A2 relatively easily. I mean, depending on, a lot of factors, but it's kind of, they move from A1 to A2 relatively quickly. When you then get to A2, it takes much longer to get to B1. And then when you get to B1, it seems to take forever to get to B2. And again, there are always many reasons why this happens, but one of the reasons is there is much more in A2, B1 and B2 than there is in A1, because A2, B1, B2 are two levels. So that is one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why learning appears to slow down. It's not slowing down, you've just got more to get through before you can demonstrate that you're B1. So that would give you 9 levels. And then in the 2018 updated version of the companion volume, the extra learning objectives that were added in 2018, they added pre-A1, below A1 level. So today there are effectively 10 levels. And you can see my little diagram here on the right-hand side, you've got the global scale of English, which is a numerical scale from 10 to 90. And on the left-hand side of the screen, you've got those common European framework levels, and then some pretty strange numbers called logits. That just basically means, number, and it comes from an academic research project. And that academic research project was the project that created the Common European Framework. And why am I showing you this? I can hear you cry. What I wanted to show was, as part of the research, all of the learning objectives for the Common European Framework were given a difficulty value, a numerical difficulty value, so they were all leveled from the highest proficiency to the lowest proficiency. And then when they were published, this group is A1, this group is A2, this group is A2 plus, this group is B1, B1 plus. And so what we've done with the global scale of English is take that numerical scale, the original numerical scale, but transposed it onto a positive scale. We don't want to tell a learner their level is minus 3.23. We want to motivate. That's not a great story. We don't want to say by the end of the year, we want to get you to minus 2.21. No. But we want to say you're 30. That means exactly the same as minus 3.23. That means exactly the same as the very start of A2. And when you get to 43, you will be at the very start of B1. But the beauty of having a numerical scale is that within A2, we can say, okay, you're A2 30, you're A2 33, you're A2 37, you're A2 39, A2 plus 39. You are still technically in that A2 level of the Common European Framework, but 30, 33, 37, 39, 42, you can see that progress is being made. And so that is key for us in the development of the global scale of English to have a way to demonstrate progress on a more regular basis. So the best practice, putting best practice into our learning, teaching, and assessment. I love this. If anybody on the call loves art, I love this. I've stolen it from one of my colleagues who like to use this as a metaphor for learning. And this is by a British-born Indian artist called Anish Kapoor. And this is one of his installations called Shooting into the Corner, where balls of wax are shot into the corner. And as you can see, some of them stick on the wall, but most of them fall to the floor. And so my colleague always said, for him, a lot of teaching that goes on in classrooms is like this. We throw information at students and we hope that some of it sticks. And so by implementing best practice, what we're effectively doing is trying to get more to stick on the wall than falls on the floor. So my question to you, again, into the chat, what are some of the key steps in best practice learning and teaching? For example, last time I presented on placement and diagnostic. Placing somebody, knowing the starting level of somebody at the beginning of a course of study is one of the solid foundations on which to build learning and teaching. Can you think of any other best practice that helps us to ensure that more of what we teach is learned? Bit more of a challenging question, that. Okay, yeah, constant feedback, giving feedback always comes out really high in any survey around what impacts learning. Yeah. Checking their homework, yeah, giving people real life tasks, so making sure that what you're doing is relevant to the real world. Yeah, honest feedback, yes, but objective feedback, I would say. Yeah, plenty of practice. Exit cards at the end of the lesson, nice. Needs analysis, okay. If you have the luxury to run needs analysis, that's great. Objective-based assessments, not only assessments, but objective-based teaching, yes. Reflection, okay. Study plans, excellent. Okay, so this is a summary of best practice teaching and assessment. So as I said, we start by placing somebody at the beginning of a course of study. We then plan our course of study and our lessons, which we teach, and we hope that the students are going to learn. But constantly, we want to check. We want to monitor progress. We want to monitor whether or not something that we have taught has been understood. And then when it hasn't been understood, we want that information to feed into what we do next, and repairing or remediating or repeating, so that we're not moving on when students have clearly not understood what's going on. And so the topic of today's webinar, this idea of monitoring progress, measuring progress on a regular basis, is a key part of embedding best practice teaching and assessment into your classes. So what are the foundations that we need to support progress monitoring? So again, you can pop into your into the chat what needs to be in place. And like I said before, the first step is we need to know where a learner is starting. What else do you need to have in place to be able to measure progress? This one's maybe a little bit more tricky. You need some form of assessments, yes, to monitor that, be that informal or formal assessments, yeah. A good course book, yeah. Questioning, constantly questioning the learners, yeah. Anything else? Mini tests, yep. Mini formal or informal tests. And feedback again. Okay, here are some of the things that I popped down. So again, establishing where you're starting. And then if you're measuring progress, what are you measuring progress towards? So you probably need to be setting a target for the end of the course. You need to know if you're on track to meet that target, right? And you need these little, and somebody said, the mini tests, you need these mini little targets to measure throughout your course of study. And for me, this all boils down to having SMART learning objectives. And that is effectively what we've developed with the Global Scale of English, are these SMART learning objectives. And I'm almost embarrassed to ask you to type in what does SMART mean, because I'm sure You've heard this a million times before, but if somebody could humor me and tell me what does S stand for? Maybe you've not heard it before. S stands for specific. Yes. M stands for measurable. A stands for attainable or achievable. Yep. R, realistic. He's ahead of the game there. And finally, T is, yep, timely or time-bound. Exactly. And that, as I say, is where Global Scale of English comes in, to provide you with sets of smart learning objectives to use for lesson planning, but also to use as these little mini targets within a course of study. So if you think about, maybe these are your course learning objectives. So you've got a group of students, and this is an academic English course. And by the end of your academic year, you want students to be able to give a simple presentation on a topic of their choice. You want students to be able to write a simple academic essay. And you want students to be able to understand a simple academic report. Now, for me, these are quite high level course objectives. So this is what you want to achieve by the end of your course. But there are a number of stages along the way, right? So if we think about this example, students can write a simple academic essay. What we want to do is to break this down into the different stages of being able to write an academic essay. You can't suddenly one day you can't write an essay, the next day you can. It's a gradual process. And as a teacher, you're going to focus on these different aspects: writing an introduction, writing a topic sentence, writing a concluding paragraph. You then build it all up until you can finally write a simple academic essay. One thing that you'll also notice in these learning objectives, which come from the Global Scale of English, is scaffolding is built into some of the learning objectives. So before students can write an introduction to an academic essay independently, they can do it if you give them a model to follow. And again, that's another way of introducing a mini check and a mini target before you get to the fact that they're doing it independently. Because the more little mini indicators of progress. Okay, yesterday you couldn't do this. This week, you've been able to write an introduction following a model. Tick. Reason to celebrate. It's you're making progress. So all these different ways of not only measuring progress, but also demonstrating to learners that progress is being made. And if anybody's not sharing learning objectives with the learners, then I would urge you to do that, because there's a certain amount of research out there, notably from John Hattie, who has demonstrated that actually sharing the learning objective with students has an impact on what they remember, on what they achieve by the end of the course. So if you're not sharing learning objectives, or if they're in the course book you're using, but you're skipping over them, actually draw the students' attention to them, because it can have an impact on learning. So using the Global Scale of English, we know we've placed our students and we've got them at this kind of high A1. And by the end of this course, we want to get them to a mid A2, okay, 35 to 37. And so we have this kind of what's known as the zone of proximal development, so that optimal learning teaching zone where students have a good chance of being able to master something, first with the support and scaffolding, and then independently. So we've identified our optimal learning range. With that, you can go to the teacher toolkit, specify your learning range, and you will get a list of possible learning objectives that you can use for your course or your class. Now you'll see there are 286. You will not be able to cover 286 learning objectives in your course, but this is the global scale of English. This is for all learners around the world. All of these will not be relevant to the particular needs of your group of students. So we can provide you with the starting blocks, if you like, the starting objectives. But as a teacher who knows the students, you have to make that next selection of what's relevant for your particular class. Why is that not moving? There we go. So building confidence, keeping an eye on the time. I think we're okay. So earlier this year, we published a piece of research into the impact that English has on people's careers and on their lives. And we carried it out in 5 countries. You can see them there on the screen around the world. And there's a report, and I'll share the link to the report at the end of this presentation. But from that report, what percentage of the people we asked felt confident in all 4 language skills? And these were people who were using English at work. So they're no longer in formal education. They are in work. And I just need to, I've lost my Zoom link there, but please chat into Zoom and I will see. I've lost my page. Okay. Right, I'm gonna have to call it chat on my screen then. So, okay, I'm seeing B's 35%, 45%. A, C, maybe 45%. Okay, well, the sad reality was that only a quarter of people, 25%, felt confident using all of those language skills. And probably unsurprisingly, they were least confident in speaking and writing, which in the workplace are generally the skills that you need the most, and most confident in reading and listening. And over half said that they hadn't reached a good enough level of English proficiency by the time they left formal education. And my question to you is, why do you think they said that? Why do you think, okay, they were humble? Yes, there is always that sort of self-deprecation. But what reasons do you think they gave for not achieving the level of confidence and the level of proficiency? So a lack of practice. Yep. Okay, not properly assessed, lack of practice. Any other reasons? The time limit. Yes, that did come out. Lack of dedication. Not many people said that about themselves. Not enough resources. Not being assessed, not quite good teaching skills, a way of teaching. What is it that they said was the focus of the teaching? What did they learn in class? They probably weren't aware of learning objectives. You're right. Grammar. There we go. Yes. So over half said we focused way too much on grammar and vocabulary. And then, as somebody said in the chat, there weren't enough opportunities to speak in English. And you know, more than 20 years after the publication of the Common European Framework, where the focus was supposed to shift to an assessment of the skills and what you can do with language, still around the world, there is a big focus on grammar and vocabulary. And for me, that is not only the fault of teachers, I mean, some of it is, but it's also the fault of an assessment industry that is very focused on accuracy and very focused on this type of, you know, grammar, testing grammar and vocabulary. So if it's in the test, people want to teach it. We with the global scale of English, set out to really try and build learners' confidence when in language learning. We want them to be confident coming out of education, confident to use English. And I'm sure everybody would agree building confidence is a great idea, but how do we do it? And so very quickly on the screen there, you can see four kind of aspects of building confidence. First is that, teaching to the right level of challenge that we mentioned before, setting these smart learning objectives so that you can enable students to experience success on a regular basis, and combine that all goes to develop a growth mindset, which again, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that expression. A fixed mindset, the opposite, is characterized by I'm just no good at English. This belief that you're born with an ability to speak English or you're not, and I'm just no good at English. Which, unless you have a neurological disorder, you can learn English. You've just had bad experiences, and that's why you've convinced yourself you can't learn English. Whereas a growth mindset embraces the fact that it might not be easy, but actually with enough work, you can do it. If you look at those four little categories on the screen, look how many reference measuring and giving evidence of progress. It really is key, not only to best practice learning and teaching, but also to building confidence in our students. And so if I flesh out the that diagram that I showed before around best practice, you can see that the global scale of English at Pearson underpins everything that we do. So those learning objectives used to plan the course books, and those course books used to teach, and then the assessments, which you're going to hear about in the next session, used to monitor regularly, monitor skills development, not just grammar and vocabulary, but skills development on a regular basis with rich feedback, so that you then know where there are areas of weakness within your group, within your class, and doing something about it without just moving on all the time. So, how are we doing? Bad. I think I'm running out of time. Another little quick quiz. And depending on which part of the world in your teaching experience, this might be easier or more difficult. But I want you to imagine this student. So this student speaks a first language that's very different to English. Okay, different spelling system, different pronunciation system, different alphabet. Okay, this student is not motivated. Motivation is a key driver for learning. And this student has few hours of English, 2 hours of English a week. So the possibility of forgetting between lessons is quite high. So my question to you is, how many hours does it take to move from the bottom of B1 to the bottom of B2? And I see some people saying 800, 400, 1,000. Okay, 600, 800, 600, 800, 600, 800. Okay, most people going around 600 to 800. And there we go. So actually, it's closer to 1,000 hours. So you can see there, anywhere between 380 and 1,100 hours. Now that's a huge range, but the 380 end is for somebody with quite a similar first language, who is motivated and who is studying English every day. Okay, the other extreme is more the student that we discussed. But you can see even 380 hours, that's often more than an academic year. And so to what I was saying, you're B1, you're B1, you're B1. I can't see progress. I'm not making progress. I'm plateauing. I'm going to give up. Whereas if we break it down to the numerical scale, we're able to demonstrate progress on a more regular basis. So maybe not every point, so 43 to 44, there's a margin of error there that probably isn't, makes it not significant, but 43 to 46, 46 to 49, 49 to 52, yes, you're B1, but you're not the same B1. You are making progress. And this can be motivational for both student and teacher to see that progress that's being made. That, as you will learn in the next session, is something that you can do using the digital assessments from Pearson. What if you want something a bit more informal to have tangible evidence of progress of your students? So one thing that you can do is take those learning objectives that you're going to cover in your course, create a little a little chart like the one on the screen, and get students to maybe say how confident they feel doing each of these things. Okay, most of them are going to be new, so presumably they're going to say they're not confident or not really very confident. And then at the end of the year, give them the same chart and ask them to complete it again. And then just simply by comparing where you were at the beginning, where you are at the end of the course, students can actually have tangible evidence that they've made progress. Often when you're in the learning experience, you don't have that sense of making progress. So this is one way in which you can provide tangible evidence of progress. And as teachers, we've tried to support you in assessing at different levels of proficiency. So this is, assessment is a very specialized career. People who write assessments, people who are examiners have gone through a lot of training. So what we've done is created some frameworks for teachers to enable you to get a better idea of what skills look and sound like at different levels of proficiency. And so again, these are all downloadable from the website. You'll see that they're charts which describe different levels of proficiency. So if you think about something like, a learning objective, I can write about my holidays. You can actually do that at different levels of proficiency. Okay, you can write simple sentences, you can write simple text, or you can write more structured text. You can make the vocabulary more, more complex. And so all of these different criteria are called out in the assessment frameworks. So if you want to get a better idea, even just to say, well, what actually is B1 speaking? What's it like? Well, take a look at these assessment frameworks and it will give you a nice idea. Next session, you're going to be looking at these benchmark tests, which are the digital assessments that can be used in class to measure proficiency and progress. And so some of those challenges we were looking at, so it's digital, so class size doesn't matter. You do them all at the same time. Resources, you've got the test. Time takes, can't remember exactly how long, 30, 40 minutes for the test. It already gives you the metrics that you can use, and it will give you, it will give you these progress reports, which will break down the skills and give you overall assessments. And more importantly, because this is about monitoring progress, this isn't a certification at the end of a course, it will give you information about strengths, weaknesses, areas to focus on. And if you're using it alongside of a course book, it will actually direct you to activities you can use to to remediate or to repair those areas that the student appears to be having problems with. As you'll learn, there is a class report, so you can get an idea of the whole class, but then you have individual student reports. And just flicking back there, digital assessments, how do we feel about digital assessments for measuring speaking and writing. Where are you? 1 or 2? Let me get this chat box open. 1 or 2? Why can't I open the chat? Okay, there we go. 2, 2. Ooh, there's only, okay. Quite a lot of you think human scoring is more accurate. Okay, controversial topic. We can't go into it today. There is a lot of evidence, a lot of research out there that suggests that actually artificial intelligence is very good at marking accurately and actually more consistent than human examiners. If you think about somebody, so we're not talking about you as teachers monitoring your students in the classroom. Okay, we're talking about an oral examiner seeing 10, 20, 30 learners every day for an oral exam. Humans get tired. Humans have hidden biases depending on what the person's wearing, whether they're male or female, what the previous person sounded like. Are they better or worse comparing? The computer is always comparing to the model. So I would simply urge you to be open to digital assessment. I think, yes, I'm pretty sure it will be the future of assessment. So to summarize, then we've got a couple of minutes for questions. The benefits of monitoring progress. Hopefully you've seen that it really is a way to support best practice learning and teaching. It should inform your lesson planning and what next steps, depending on what you're seeing in the classroom. It can support personalization of instruction, differentiated instruction. It will help to reduce dropout rates because people will not constantly be failing because you're in that zone of proximal development. It gives evidence of progress, and that always will increase learner motivation and support confidence building. So this is our best practice Pearson English journey with all the elements that we've talked about. And if we go back to the same artist, if we embed all of these best practices into our teaching, then hopefully more of what we throw at students sticks to the wall and doesn't end up on the floor. And I will leave you with that screen where if you would like to find the GSE teacher resources, that will take you to the website. And if you're interested in reading the Impact of English report, then that will take you to the report there. And I will end there and thank you for your attention. Bartek.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Mike. So we've got like 5 minutes. If there are any questions that you can, our wonderful audience, if you can post them in the Q&A and we'll try to answer them. And as we go by, the next session, as I mentioned before, and as Mike said, will be the practitioner experience with the benchmark digital testing. So it will be very down to earth for the school owners, for the teachers who are considering using this type of solution within their classroom. So we'll move into these options like what steps should you take at the very beginning to make the process as smooth as possible, especially if you are new to digital solutions. Okay, so there's one question in the Q&A. How do you deal with mixed level students in the classroom, Mike? I guess this is very general, but it could be with the reference to this measuring progress.
So measuring progress, yeah. Well, I think you'll hear in the practitioners session about the way in which the benchmark tests monitor progress of mixed ability classes. We know that the majority of classes are mixed ability. It is challenging. And I would say it's challenging for a teacher if you've got 30 in a class and they're mixed abilities. It shouldn't be a way, though, of an excuse for not monitoring progress. I'm not an expert on mixed ability teaching, but I know you can have, the same activity pitched at different levels, and you put people into groups, not necessarily everybody at the same level in the same group, but the stronger students supporting the less proficient students. But you can still do the monitoring. But as you'll see from the benchmark, those reports are very personalized, and actually what they'll do will demonstrate to individual learners that they're making progress. There's we always say we shouldn't be constantly comparing one student with another. You just compare the student with themselves, like what they used to be. Every student has their own goals. They'll work at their own pace. They'll make their own progress. The idea is that all students make progress, and that we don't, just go at the speed of the best students and leave half the class behind. So
Yeah.
that's what I would
Thanks,
say.
Mike. Some of you are asking about the certificate and the main points. Yes, you will get them from us via email. So you will get a link to the feedback certificate and the summary of the main points, as some of you wrote in the chat. There's another one interesting option in the Q&A that I've skipped monitoring the progress throughout the course. Is it a good idea to do it during a review at the end of the course?
So without knowing the reasons why it's been skipped, I would say it's not a great idea to skip monitoring the progress. Maybe you are monitoring progress, but in a more informal way rather than giving actual tests. So monitoring progress doesn't only mean having, a sit-down test every week. Informally, as a teacher, you can monitor, or hopefully you are monitoring the progress. The reason why it's important to do it throughout the course is that you don't want to get to the end of the course and then realize, oh no, the thing I taught in week 3, they clearly didn't get. And so that has impacted on where you are in week 10. It's a bit late to go back in week 10. So this is why we would really urge people to keep track learning throughout the course. But it doesn't have to be every week, but certainly on a regular basis. Don't just leave it to the end of the year.
Okay. And Dania, I can see your questions, and I guess it's going to be the next session is like, are students more engaged or interested in the material? I assume that you're asking this question with reference to using this progress monitoring throughout the course. And are there any noticeable changes in the quality of their work or participation? So this will be the question in the practitioner experience when we'll talk about the implementation and we'll talk about the results, because you'll hear the information about institutions that actually have a long experience in using benchmark in their practice. So you'll hear from people behind the story, what noticeable changes do they see in their teaching reality. And probably I will ask questions, are students getting more engaged when they measure progress in such a way? Okay, Mike, I guess. Yes.
Yeah, I've just got one anecdote on that you probably won't give next time, but I know we worked with an institution in Japan who introduced this progress monitoring assessment. And in Japan, people will avoid speaking at all cost. They don't want to lose face in front of classmates, and very often the teachers weren't monitoring progress in speaking. It was very much focused on grammar and vocabulary. Once the test was introduced, students focused more on speaking and put more effort into speaking. I mean, initially, because they knew it was going to be tested. And we know that students are, fundamentally, they want the path of least resistance. So they're only really going to focus on the things that they know count in the exam. If you introduce a form of testing that will test written and spoken English, they are going to prioritize it as highly as grammar and vocabulary.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mike. So 1 hour to be sharp in time. Thanks a lot for the presentation, and thanks a lot to all of you for being with us for interacting with us via the chat and the Q&A. So as mentioned before, you will get the summary, the certificate, and the feedback via email by Monday at the latest. And we look forward to seeing you in the next webinar next month on the benchmark practitioner experience. So measuring progress, down to earth, steps you should take to make this process really smooth and profitable for your educational language journey. Thanks a lot again for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your day or night for some of the people, and hope to see you soon. Thank you, Mike, for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.